Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome you from Athens. I would like to say good afternoon, and I'm very happy that you are joining us for a timely and what we believe at ELIAMEP, we believe is a highly relevant debate. Our theme today, our topic is mediation or solidarity, ? Germany's role or Germany's roles in the Greek-Turkish conflicts. Thank you once again for joining. We are aware that there are many possibilities to spend your time otherwise. We live in a competitive environment, but I am positive that you will not be bored in the coming 60 minutes as we have with us a panel of excellent experts in the field. And together with my three colleagues, our aim is to inform and to share commentary in a hopefully balanced fashion on, as I said before, an important topic, surely an important topic for Turkey, for Greece, and also in an indirect manner for Germany. We have with us three experienced and distinguished colleagues. I would begin with Professor Dr. Ebru Turhan, who is an associate professor at the Turkish-German University in Istanbul, and also a senior research fellow at the Institute for European Politics in Berlin. So you have the bilateral connection here very strongly. Her current research interests include EU-Turkey affairs. The European Union will definitely play a role in our discussion, German foreign policy, and German-Turkish relations. Next in our panel is Ioannis Grigoriadis. He is a senior research fellow at ELIAMEP, and he heads the Turkey program. He is an associate professor and Jean Monnet Chair of European Studies at Bilkent University in Ankara. But I think it's fair to say that Ioannis is now connecting from Armenia. So great to have you, Ioannis. We should maybe mention also that his research interests include late Ottoman and Republican Turkish politics and history with a focus on nationalism and democratization. And I think living in Greece, it's fair for me to say that Ioannis has become something of a media personality, as he is relatively often, if not daily, on television and radio, commenting and informing about Greek-Turkish affairs. And last but not least, I'm very happy that Dr. Günther Seufert is with us, who represents and works for the German Institute for International Security Affairs, SWP, Stiftung Wissenschaft und Politik. Importantly, he heads CATS, which is the Center for Applied Turkey Studies, and his areas of expertise, of course, Turkey, but also Cyprus, where Dr. Seufert spent some years as an associate professor, EU enlargement, European Union, and also migration issues. My name is Ronald Meinardus. I'm your moderator today. I'm a senior fellow at ELIAMEP, where I have the privilege to head the Mediterranean program. Before we set off, a word of thanks to our partners at the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, the Athens office. This webinar is part of a series we are conducting with the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, dealing particularly with the Greek-German relations. These are relations which have good sides, but they also have some problematic sides. And the Greek nexus, the Greek-Turkish nexus is one of the issues which is a problem in these relations, and I'm sure we will discuss this also in the next couple of minutes. Last but not least, a big thank you to Mariana Vassilopoulou. She is the person behind the screen, and Konstantinos, the technical people. As always, we could not do all this without our colleagues behind the screen. A reminder, these are controversial issues we will talk about. You're invited to share your comments and questions. Please send them to events@eliamep.gr events@eliamep.gr, and we will do our best to answer these or to deal with these. I said that this is a timely issue. Tensions between Greece and Turkey are once more running high. Some are talking about an escalation this summer. And what is striking, if you look at the positions of Athens and Ankara government, you see very different perspectives and very different narratives. And I would like to start our discussion with asking Ebru to present to us, maybe in 2 or 3 or maybe maximum 4 minutes, how the Turkish official view and the Turkish narrative unfolds in the Greek-Turkish issue. Please.
Thank you very much, dear Ronald, for the invitation. Also, thank you very much to ELIAMEP. I think this is a very timely topic, and I'm also very happy to be here with my dear friends and colleagues. In terms of narratives, I think it's a very good question, because it's also kind of an icebreaker for us, right? Like to talk a little bit about the contemporary history and, you know, the presence of Greek-Turkish relationship. And as we already talked a little bit in our pre-discussion a few minutes ago under the closed doors, what is perceived by the Turkish media or by the Turkish political elite is completely different from what is perceived in Germany or in Athens. In that sense, I think it's a great question. And as we all know, narratives are actually very fluid, right? They don't, they are not there to stay. They change. They change in view of, you know, domestic interests. They change in view of domestic preferences, and also they change in view of key milestones such as election atmosphere or external crises, internal crises, etc., etc. And this has also been the case for Greek-Turkish relationship. When we look at the kind of contemporary history of Greek-Turkish relationship, we see, for instance, until 1999, right, when Turkey was actually candidate status was acknowledged, the Turkish official narrative was, you know, the perception of Greece as a central rival and, you know, hostile neighbor and conflict-inducing neighbor in the immediate neighborhood. But following 1999, where also Greece played a key role, right, in the confirmation of Turkey's candidacy status, Turkish narratives actually had a quite big experienced a quite big change, in the sense that we have seen the resurgence of another narrative, for instance, Greece as an important economic partner, Greece as a quite important neighbor, and also Greece, I would say, as a key supporter of Turkish accession process. So that was the case, I would say, quite until, I would say, 2016, until the attempted coup in 2016. Until then, Turkish narratives on Greece, official narratives, and also particularly the media narratives remained quite positive. But following the coup attempt and also the outbreak of the Eastern Mediterranean crisis, we have again observed, I would say, a return back to the hostility narrative. Greece as a conflict-inducing and hostile neighbor that is also a threat to Turkey's sovereignty and territorial integrity. But then again, in March 2022, right after the Russian-Ukrainian war, there was a visit by the Greek PM Mitsotakis to Turkey, and following this visit, we have seen that Ankara shifted temporarily, at least temporarily, its narrative, and said that in view of this key milestone of Ukrainian-Russian war, Turkey and Greece have a special responsibility in the European security architecture, and they should collaborate more. So we have seen again a return back to a more, smooth neighborly relationship. It was a very temporary one, but again, key milestones do have an effect on the narratives of the political elite and of the media. What are the latest narratives? Again, a return back to the perception of Greece as a hostile, conflict-inducing, somehow, a neighbor that is a threat to Turkey's territorial sovereignty. And also, these narratives are going hand in hand with narratives on the EU, right? In the Turkish media and by the Turkish political elite, perceiving the EU as a biased union right now, which is actually sidelining Turkey and being on the side of Greece and remaining silent on so-called illegal actions of Greece in the international territorial waters, and also vis-a-vis, in terms of the pushbacks vis-a-vis the refugees. So this is actually the current status, I think, when we look at the Turkish media and at the Turkish political elite and their narratives. And these narratives are driven both by domestic as well as political events, and we can talk about them probably also in our next rounds.
No, thank you very much. Also, the ups and downs and the EU factor, of course, is something we will look at very carefully, and also Germany's role in maybe defining the EU factor. Okay, Yanni, now on to you, because if I hear a threat to territorial integrity coming from Greece, what I read in the Greek papers, the standard formulation is that the threat, the apili, as we say here, is coming from Turkey. Please, what is your take on the perspectives of the Greek side on Greek-Turkish relations today?
Well, the Greek perspective on this issue is focusing on this rapid escalation of statements coming from high-level Turkish officials that refer to the bilateral disputes in ways that were not raised before. So, for example, focusing on the demilitarization of the Aegean, of the Eastern Aegean islands, and linking the question of demilitarization with Greek sovereignty over the Aegean is something unprecedented. And in that respect, it's also unprecedented the character, the personal tone of the attacks against the Greek prime minister coming from the Turkish president, of course, other high-ranking Turkish officials. It is important to remember here that, as Ebru mentioned before, this rapid escalation was preceded by an attempt to mend the fences between Greece and Turkey following the outbreak of Russia's invasion in Ukraine. So there was an attempt to highlight the joint membership of NATO for Greece and Turkey and what this could mean for them as the Russian threat emerged again in the north, and Greece and Turkey had common interest in addressing the developments in Ukraine and finding a way to build a common policy on this. So in that context, the meeting of the Greek prime minister with the Turkish president in Istanbul took place. Unfortunately, we moved in the opposite direction. And
this is in March of this year, to just let, we're talking about the March of this year, yes. Very recent.
The recent meeting, yes. And we moved, unfortunately, in the opposite direction. And now we're having a situation which is very tense. The Greek media that have always spent a lot of attention on Turkish politics, domestic and foreign policy, note with concern all these statements. And of course, it is very important to mention here that Germany's position in that discussion is something that I would like to shed our attention, to put our attention on. We at ELIAMEP are running a series of opinion surveys together with our partner IPC, Istanbul Policy Center in Turkey, and we try to track tendencies and trends in Greek and Turkish public opinion. So while we keep some constant questions, we change the questionnaire depending on the topical issues and developments. So we did ask a couple of questions on the public opinion view in Greece and Turkey with relation to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And it was interesting to see that the Turkish public holds a much more positive attitude towards Germany and its policy in the region compared to Greece. So the Turkish public, for example, feels more comfortable with Germany's involvement in disputes in the region compared to France or even the United States. And while the Greek public appears to prefer the European Union or the United States or France but not Germany when it comes to this. Of course, this is a very important point that needs to be discussed between us here, and I think it's important for German foreign policy to consider as well.
Yes, we should maybe, I'm also with ELIAMEP, and maybe we should use this opportunity also to advertise this very significant opinion poll. And you just presented a couple of days ago the third wave, and the numbers are really very, very astonishing. The national interests of Greece and Turkey can be better served through cooperation with Germany, is the statement. And then 35% of the Turks would agree. And that's the highest number of Turkish support for an international partnership. And in Greece, it's only 26. This is indeed quite striking. I actually copied this out because for me, this was one of the most interesting parts. Now, Günter Seufert, from a German think tank's perspective, looking very carefully at the region here, how would you comment on this? And what are the German perspectives and narratives to all this?
Yeah, thank you, and also thank you to Ebru and to Ioannis what they have said, and I think they provided a very good framework for what I'm going to say. First, I think, as Ioannis said, I think Germany does maybe a little bit provocative, neither deserve the positive issue, the positive image it has in Turkey, and the negative image it has in Greece. Because this image, but I think it was not only but greatly influenced and shaped by the role Germany played in the last Turkish and Greek crisis in the Eastern Mediterranean in the 2020s. Naturally, there are other things to it from the more distant history of Germany and Greece. And we know the atrocities of the German soldiers in Greece during the Second World War. But when it comes to the crisis in 2020, I think I have to remind us that at that time, the German position was very much in line with the overall EU approach. And I think it was at that time, France very much sided with Greece, but France was isolated, more or less, in the European Union. It was not able to put its policy through in NATO. And at that time, both NATO partners and the EU members, in an overwhelming majority, joined in an approach that tried to mediate, that tried to offer Turkey something, namely a positive agenda in the case of de-escalation, and that in a way started from the assumption that Turkey is and will remain a very important security partner for the European Union, and therefore, beside its conflicts with Greece, also a very important security partner of Greece. And I think we can boil down the different approaches of France and Germany at that time, according to a French scholar who said, and I think rightly so, who said Germany at that time tried to secure the status quo. And for France and its more confrontational approach towards Turkey, France acted from a perception that there is no status quo at the moment, that the Turkish activities in the Eastern Mediterranean had been of such a profound character that a status quo had in a way be seriously threatened, if not even done away. And the question for me is now seeing both Turkey's rhetoric towards Greece in the Aegean, and together with Turkey's other recent foreign policy moves, particularly naturally to veto the membership of Sweden and NATO. Of Sweden and Finland to NATO in a time where NATO, I think, faces an unprecedented challenge, and for a time where all the NATO states are in a way united in the case of Sweden's and Finland's accession to NATO, and also justify this as a necessity for strengthening the eastern flank, and see this as crucial for other NATO members, particularly the Baltic states that are members in one alliance, where Turkey is also a member, that these two foreign policy moves the vetoing of Sweden's and Finland's accession, but also of creating an additional security problem, maybe not a threat, but a serious security problem at the eastern flank in a time where we have such another security, a war at the southeastern flank of NATO. This really is, in my view, really threatening to further undermining the reliability of Turkey.
Mr. Seufert, before we go there, and because I've listened very carefully with your analysis and your commentary to what happened in 2020. And this is a scenario which we read again and again in the newspapers. We are afraid that what we see now might escalate to 2020. And then the journalists write, the two NATO partners were not far away from a military confrontation. Could you please explain to us what actually happened there? And very concretely, what was the quality of the German intervention that prevented things to escalate?
In 2020, I'm not sure if it was the German intervention who prevented things to escalate. I think we have to be modest, and we have to give at least as much credit to the NATO's efforts to mediate the conflict and to de-escalate as one factor. And there's also, I think, another factor that happened or that contributed very much to the de-escalation. That was the accession of Mr. Biden to the US presidency, and therefore, which ended in a way as a very private relationship or close man-to-man, person-to-person relationship between Donald Trump and Recep Tayyip Erdogan. But the German effort was really to mediate at the level of the Chancellery between Turkey and Greece, and we know that they had some rounds of direct contacts here in Berlin. And that there was also, as far as I know, there was a kind of established of a preliminary atmosphere of trust, which was then very much to the surprise both of Germany and of Turkey, was then in a way ended by the signing of the delimitation agreement between Greece and Egypt, where the German side has not been, to my knowledge, had not been informed of it. And I can only say that to what I have heard here in Berlin, that the German Foreign Office at least would be ready to again to mediate between Turkey and Greece, but we will come to this maybe later. I very much doubt that it would be easy to start such a format again, because a lot of things, almost all things in the equation have changed.
Yes, that's very good. Thank you we should come to that, of course. We will come to that. But I would like to ask Ebru Hanım, who is also an expert in Turkish-European relations. To what extent what happened 2020 with Germany mediating there, was this a German Sonderweg? Was this a German isolated action? Or was this always in coordination with the European Union, as was Germany kind of acting as primus inter pares, as spokesperson of the Union? Can you maybe enlighten us on that? And maybe also a small comment on the French topic, footnote.
Yeah, actually, dear Ronald, I was exactly going to start with that one, because if we want to delve a bit deeper into the German factor in this Eastern Mediterranean crisis solution or resolution, I think we should also put emphasis on this Franco-German tandem. As already mentioned by Günther, actually, Macron had a more assertive, we could say, policy vis-a-vis Turkey when it came to the to the Eastern Mediterranean crisis. And here we should also probably differentiate between France and Germany, because France has actually quite deep-rooted, right, historic interests actually in the region, and also leadership aspirations, long-established leadership aspirations in the region. And France is also actually striving more recently for a greater leadership aspiration also within the EU, within the European Council, also vis-a-vis Angela Merkel at that time when Angela Merkel was in the office. And this has all been reflected actually in the in the then French policy vis-a-vis Turkey in 2020, and because France was actually calling for more sanctions, to the point sanctions, which were supposed to be announced by the European Council conclusions at that time. And this is actually exactly when Angela Merkel and her team intervened. And there, I would say, in the Franco-German tandem, Merkel had a greater leverage at that time, at least, and was able to convince both Macron and the other 27 member states about not delivering any sanctions vis-a-vis Turkey, but rather proposing this so-called conditional political, positive political agenda, right, which included many transactional, sector-specific, conditional incentives, which were supposed to be given to Turkey if Turkey would behave more constructive in the Eastern Mediterranean. So I think here we see, just like in the refugee deal, in the formulation of the EU-Turkey refugee deal, the Merkel factor, and also the way she handled this question within the European Council by sometimes having this Alleingang, right, going unilaterally with not that much consultation with the European partners, but finding a solution that may be acceptable to the European partners. Again, at the time when there was this leadership vacuum or a rising leadership of Macron, but which was not maybe that much beneficial to German interests. Also in the way East Mediterranean crisis would be resolved in the eyes of Macron, Merkel intervened, I would say, because we shouldn't also forget, and that would be my last sentence to your question, the German, influence, or the rising German influence in Eastern Mediterranean crisis and in solving this crisis in 2020 coincided with Germany's EU presidency. Right?
Yes.
The EU Council presidency. So if there would have been an escalation of the Greek-Turkish, let's say, conflict, which would also involve other member states, such as France, Ankara would have definitely deemed Germany and particularly Merkel responsible for that. And that would have also sort of spilled over as I would say, kind of politicization and, escalation of German-Turkish tensions and conflicts. And that would be most probably also not that much favorable for Merkel at the time when she was holding the EU presidency and also ahead of the German federal elections.
Thank you so much. And this all then was documented in the statement of 25 March 2021, which was the conclusion of the summit then, where this conditional cooperation was codified and the positive agenda was shown to the Turkish government as an incentive to stop the provocations in inverted commas and in change for that to be rewarded with certain forms of cooperation. Now, Ioannis, this statement of 25 March 2021 is again and again quoted in following summit meeting resolutions. So it seems it's still valid. It was also quoted the other day, end of June, when they met a couple of days ago. So this is somehow holding the whole situation under control. So why is this now seemingly coming apart and not working out? Why do you suggest, or would you comment, is Mr. Erdogan not attracted by the incentives the Europeans are showing him?
I think there are some important reasons for this. First, the situation in Turkey, the domestic situation, has gone from bad to worse economically and socially, and there's a very strong incentive, in my opinion, to the Turkish government to try to shift attention from domestic political qualms into international politics. This is an area whereby Turkey, the Turkish government thinks that they can score more points, and it's easier to consolidate its voter base around a leader figure of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And what is very important here to raise, and I refer back to our opinion poll again, that the cause of a truly independent Turkish foreign policy, or a Turkey which is enjoying strategic autonomy, is enormously popular in the Turkish public opinion. Our question received more than 80% of positive responses. So anything that makes Turkey appear as a sort of a player that can ignore the position of France, the United States, can even try to sort of promote its own agenda with Germany, or with a sort of complacency of Germany, because this is the way that the Greek public opinion addresses this, that the Greek public opinion would expect Germany to insist more on principles like the full respect for international law and the sort of the agreements that have been between Turkey and the European Union regarding the resolution of disputes. But it appears that the Turkish government is able to benefit from like complacency or weakness or gaps in the European foreign policy making in order to project a stronger, a more unilateralist vision about the region. And this, of course...
So are you suggesting, Yanni, that the response from the Europeans towards the Turkish behavior or escalation is different today than it was 2 years ago? Is this your suggestion?
I wouldn't say so, but I think that the strategic environment is different because of Russia's invasion in Ukraine. So there is an assault, and an open assault against international law and order. And in a sense, I think the Greek public opinion would expect a stronger commitment to key principles of international law by Europe, by the European Union, and by Germany when it comes to this point. Because otherwise, the common perception has been that also through this personal relationship between Chancellor Merkel and President Erdogan, Germany and Turkey have built a relationship that sort of allows for toleration of Turkey's deviation from the rule of law on the domestic front as well, and on the international front as well. So there was a lot of discussion about the special relationship between Chancellor Merkel and President Erdogan, and there was to some degree some hope about a change with a new government, especially with the fact that a strong supporter of human rights took the position of the foreign minister of Germany, like from the Green Party. The idea would be that these issues would be higher on the German agenda, and this hasn't been proven right so far. So I understand that this.
Yanni, I'm sorry for interrupting you. The Greek Prime Minister, after the conclusions of the last summit, 23 and 24 June, and there was a statement by the heads of state that verbatim, Turkey must respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all EU member states. Mm-hmm. And Kyriakos Mitsotakis said this is totally okay, it satisfies our position. So actually then, what is all the fuss about? The European Union has shown its clear solidarity with the Greek position. And a couple of days earlier, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz calls on Turkey to refrain and stop flying over Greek islands. And it seems counterproductive, and it's against the spirit of an ally. So sometimes I'm asking myself, what is the expectations? All these quotes I'm giving are very, very problematic from a Turkish perspective. In Turkey, they would say, hey, they're siding with the Greeks. And so what I'm somehow coming to a conclusion, Germany is somehow sitting between two stools and doesn't really know what to do. Our question is solidarity on the one side or mediation. And I would like to go to Günther Seufert now and say, Ioannis said a little while ago that in a qualitative and a quantitative state, the behavior of Turkey towards Greece has changed to the worse. And the questioning of the sovereignty of Greek islands is indeed a new dimension. And the very personal, insulting comments by President Erdogan regarding the Greek Prime Minister are also unheard of in international diplomacy. How would you characterize this? Is Yanni right to say this is a new format, it's a new stage?
Yes, I think he is right. But let me first say that I very much in line with what you said, and regarding what to ask ourselves and also to ask Yanni and maybe the listeners in Greece more concrete was what does the Greek public expect given the statement of German politicians, the recent statement, but also given the declarations from the side of the European Union. And therefore, I think we can also expect that the Greek public is in a way, also giving credit to what was said and taking notice of what was said. I also very much agree with Ioannis on a lot of issues. Also, what he said that the environment has changed and the context has changed, and I think also the quality of Turkish policy has changed, because I think from a German perspective, what happened in 2020, even if we had statements of the European Union who talked about the violation of, for example, the Cypriot exclusive economic zones. And I think here, from the perspective of international law, there is no question that that this has been the case, because the Republic of Cyprus is an internationally recognized state and has therefore the right to establish exclusive economic zones. But when it comes to the differences between Greece and Turkey, particularly in the Aegean, there was very much of a German perception that both parts, in a way, put forward maximalist claims, and that particular the situation in the Aegean with so many groups of islands and the location of the islands, that this is a situation sui generis, whereas there is no model you can in a way take as an example. There's no example you can model a solution to it, and you have to negotiate and to have to go in the case negotiations are not successful to international courts, and therefore there is a lot of room for mediation. Today, I think we are in a different environment because questioning the sovereignty of the Greek islands, of Athens, over the Eastern Aegean islands, with almost, I'm not an international expert on international law, but to my knowledge, without really serious juridical legitimation, and to threaten really with military action as what has been done, and this from a military background where you have really a growing Turkish military might, particularly from the Greek Navy, and you have together with it an expansionist maritime policy, and the theoretical or the strategic concepts for it is really unprecedented. And therefore, I think from this direction, the context is different. The context is also different from what we said before, as it happens in a time of war and a serious challenge to NATO security. And I think the context is also different in regard to the position of Germany in the European Union. We all know that Mrs. Merkel was a heavyweight in the European Union. I think due to three factors: she had such a long term of office, and therefore she was known as a very efficient negotiator and somebody who was able to bring different parts together. Second, she managed, in a way, let's not talk about success, but she managed two European crises, the Euro crisis and the refugee crisis. And third, she had, I think, how difficult always, she had a kind of personal relationship with Mr. Erdogan. And none of this,
we will get to that in a while.
And therefore, I think this is very difficult, and therefore, I doubt that it would be easy to expect a similar role of Germany, even if the new government would be ready to carry out that role or to play this role.
I must say that we have some comments here in the chat box, and there's Polity21 is saying, how do we see the whole thing under the condition of the legal substance under international law? I would just emphasize here, we are not lawyers here, and we are not in the position to take a legal statement here. Please excuse us. This is maybe a deficiency of this panel. We are discussing the politics of it. Of course, it has a legal background, and if everything goes well, eventually there will be a legal solution to this. But Ebru Hanım, I want to ask you, I mean, there's an agreement with Mr. Seufert and Mr. Grigoriadis that the context is different, and that the Turkish policy towards Greece has obviously become a little more tense and a little more offensive, if you see it from a Greek perspective. First of all, would you agree? And if this is the case, how would you explain this?
I would like to, definitely answer this question and combine it also with some other points. First of all, both Turkish policy vis-a-vis Greece is different, and also the Greek policy vis-a-vis Turkey is different. I mean, more assertive, and this we could particularly, I would say, explain with the concept of politicization, which I definitely link also to some systemic changes, right? Or opportunity providing events, which is actually also the upcoming Turkish elections, as well as the upcoming Greek elections, right? In that sense, elections are opportunity providing events and mechanisms for politicization. What does politicization mean? That issues which should be dealt by political elites, and particularly at the intergovernmental level behind closed door, are opened to mass politics, or are opened to the attention of wider public opinion. And this is exactly what we are experiencing. I think it is more rhetoric than actually action. In that sense, I'm a bit more positive when it comes actually to the future, let's say, of Greek-Turkish relationship, but only after we survive 2023, because 2023 is a key milestone both for Turkey as well as for Greece when it comes to the elections. And I fear, and this is also my answer to what kind of a mediator role could Germany play or other key member states play in this new Aegean crisis. It's a bit different than the Eastern Mediterranean crisis. It's a new Aegean crisis, Aegean Sea crisis. First of all, if Germany would want to play a role, any role in this crisis, in the resolution of this crisis, the steps should be taken in the second half of 2022. Because after the second half of 2022, both Germany and other actors may lose the opportunity to play any role, because the relationship between Greece and Turkey will most probably be even more politicized and mediatized by political elite of both countries. And even German-Turkish relations are going to be most probably more prone to politicization and to mediatization on both sides, I would say. In that sense, if any steps will be taken, this should be 2022. And another problem, I think, Ronald, is we have talked about the positive political agenda, right? Conditional positive political agenda, and this transactionalism, which was actually integrated into EU-Turkey relationship with this positive political agenda and the supposed incentives that were supposed to be given or provided to Turkey. We see that even this transactional conditionality and these incentives were not fully pursued after 2020. I think this is also one of the key problems that actually is lying ahead of us right now. Is EU really willing to pursue a positive political agenda? Because even after the kind of de-escalation of the crisis, right? After 2020 and 2021, the Turkish side was not able to witness, this reinvigoration of the positive political agenda because
and that is where you saw the argument goes. The Turkish side delivered. They stopped their provocations in the Eastern Med, and the European side didn't reciprocate. Is this what you're suggesting?
The European side not fully actually reciprocated, right? We have seen that.
What had you expected? What do you expect? What does Turkey expect?
It is, of course, not an excuse for escalation. This is something else. But if we are going to talk as scholars about, means to de-escalate, again, this reinvigorated crisis, I think we have to also talk about the institutional dynamics. And one of them is, for instance, this high-level dialogue mechanisms, right? Some high-level dialogue mechanisms have already been actually integrated, such as food safety, for instance, high dialogue mechanism on migration, etc. But other high-level dialogue mechanisms, for instance, energy and transport, are still blocked.
And this has nothing to do with Turkish behavior at the Aegean or the Eastern Med. This has other reasons.
But one of the reasons, I would say, we are not talking about reasons. We are talking about mechanism and tools with which we could again de-escalate. We could again de-escalate the escalation. When we talk about possible tools, for me, from my point of view, one possible tool to de-escalate the current crisis would be the kickoff of the modernization of the customs union reform, talks. Why? Because these talks include issues directly related to Eastern Mediterranean, issues directly related to the Cyprus conflict. And this was, for instance, one point of the positive political agenda. If the positive political agenda could have opened or kicked off these negotiations in 2021, I believe that at least there could have been a smoother transition to today. So I think there are two things which we should be watchful about for the immediate future. The first one is the upcoming elections. The upcoming elections will be very prone to politicization. That means
Turkey elections, not the Greek elections.
Particularly the Turkey election, yes. But any election in our political science literature, our findings actually, our scholarly findings actually emphasize that any election is prone to politicization of the foreign policy and the blurring of the lines between domestic politics and foreign policy making. In that sense, if any steps should be taken and could be taken, this should be taken on the side of Germany, second half of 2022. And I think in order to promote the escalation, I'm not talking about the reasons of escalation, but about mechanisms which could at least propel the de-escalation.
Okay, now I think your argument has become clear. So
I think customs union element, yes. Because it includes direct, relations to the Cyprus conflict and to the Eastern Mediterranean crisis, customs union modernization the negotiations, if they could be kicked off, this could provide at least another platform to talk about these issues.
Okay, I wanted very briefly, thank you so much, Ioannis. I want to again highlight the importance of your research, and the politicization issue is a big factor, and the conventional wisdom explanation for behavior of Mr. Erdogan is indeed the upcoming election and his economic problems he has now. And this is a disclaimer. The public opinion is done by the most respected Turkish and Greek companies. So it is not a Greek study, it's really a Greek-Turkish study in the best sense of the word. My impression, Ioannis, and please correct me, is that this policy which is followed at this moment is bipartisan. It has support also from the opposition. This is not Erdoganism. This is the political class in toto following this unfriendly politics regarding Greece. Can you please explain with the results you have?
Yes, I will do so, but I think I first owe an answer to Günther's question about some of the reasons about this strong negative position against Germany by the Greek public opinion. I can remember, for example, Greece's unsuccessful attempts to convince Germany to cancel or delay the sale of submarines to Turkey.
Yes, we have to speak about the submarines, of course.
Which has been juxtaposed again, the positions of the Biden administration on F-35s or even F-16s. Of course, this has become a focal point in the Greek-Turkish confrontation recently, especially the visit of the Greek Prime Minister and his address in the Congress and elsewhere. But I think it's important to remember this because a great part of the Greek public opinion still considers that Germany prioritizes economic interests. And of course, it has very deep and important economic relations with Turkey. And this is trumping any security or political considerations that address Greek interests or European interests in the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. Getting to your question, I would agree, Ronald, that the position...
Mr. Seufert, I want you to answer this, but
yes,
okay,
yes.
Please, you
Let's
go
get back
on.
to your
Yes.
question now.
Yes.
It is true that the mainstream position of the opposition coalition is very close to the official Turkey position on the disputes between Greece and Turkey. And I think that this can be also understood as a tactical move by the opposition, because exactly they don't want to let the government escape the emphasis on economic and social issues by telling them that, you know, we disagree on fundamental foreign policy issues. But an optimistic sign of the opinion survey we ran is that the voters of the opposition party appear to be much more willing to consider compromise solutions. They're more willing to engage with Greeks, to visit Greece, to seek dialogue and conciliation. So although at the top political level, I would agree that there's no opportunity at this moment for a different discussion, although I must highlight Mayor Imamoglu's statement in the height of the crisis that we want to promote dialogue and conciliation between Greece and Turkey. So there were some political leaders that failed to bandwagon on nationalism on this. But what is most important is that the public opinion, the voters of the opposition coalition appear to be more ready to seek dialogue and conciliation in Greek-Turkish relations.
Thank you. Thank you also for the shortness of your, because we have 10 more minutes and there are 2 or 3 more points I really want to raise. Dr. Seufert, there is Mr. Dr. Grigoriadis who is stating the perception here that the economic interests which are driving the foreign policy towards Germany in favor of Turkey, and therefore structurally in a way, the Germans are not in the position to be an honest broker, if you may. And certainly not an ally of the Greeks. You'd have to, yes.
No, thank you, Yanni, for reminding me and the public, our listeners, to that. I think I have to agree. This was heatedly debated both in Germany, but also in the European Parliament, as you know. And I think this was one example where Germany put its economic interests prior to the Greek concerns. Additionally, again, also naturally with the argument that Turkey is a NATO partner and that therefore we have an interest in also arming a NATO partner. But I don't say that this has to be convincing for everybody. I think also that, but I think again that you cannot compare it to the F-35 issue, because the F-35 issue had something to do with the security of NATO and NATO warplanes, and this is not the case naturally with the submarines. But I fully agree that this is a very important point. And
wait, now this is insider talk. No, Dr. Seufert, you have to explain to the audience where is the status of the submarines, and are they going to be delivered now, or what's going on there?
I think we are not talking about of submarines to be delivered, but we are talking about of parts to submarines coming from Germany and submarines to be built in Turkey, and these parts are, as far as I know, are going to be delivered. I think the permission had been granted, and I don't see any move now to stop this at the moment, to my knowledge.
And it is known that it's on record that the Greek government has made it public that they object to this delivery. That's very clear.
Yes, that's very clear. What did I want to say else? I think Ioannis is right, and I can only support what he has said. We had now, in the last week, we had articles from very influential think tankers on Turkish foreign policy, and they explicitly said that the Turkish government is going to concentrate in the months before the upcoming election on foreign policy issues, namely on NATO, on Greece, Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean, and on the north of Syria with another intervention of Turkish troops into the north of Syria. And there we see that it is only the policies towards Greece, where the two main opposition parties, namely the GHP, the Republican People's Party, and the Good Party, in a way, are in full line with the government, or are even accusing the government of being not tough enough. Whereas in the other two subjects, they don't agree so totally with the government. When it comes to the NATO, the E party, the Good Party, would have a more conciliatory and a more reluctant approach. Whereas when it comes to the Kurds, it is the Republican People's Party who is in a way more differing with the government. And therefore, I really fear that this policy of Turkey towards Greece is going to continue. I have another doubt, but I'm not sure. I think I was wondering, because it happened so immediately, the escalation now with Greece, and I sometimes, namely, it happened after the speech of Mitsotakis in Washington, and I can hardly imagine that a speech is really a game changer for a foreign policy. And therefore, I have sometimes the fear that we are dealing a lot with an escalated rhetoric of Turkey in the Aegean, but at the same time, we might tend to overlook a more deep-running, step-by-step policy of Turkey towards Cyprus, where we see really a very calm but step-by-step escalation now with the opening of Russia, with the two-state solution, with the grip on the political will of the Turkish Cypriots, and with an ongoing policy now for 2 years. And I sometimes fear that we are too much being attracted by the recent escalation towards Greece, and we are in a way missing to really spend too much attention on what is going on in Cyprus.
Well, that's a very sober account. I'd like to end our little discussion here. We could go on and on. Cyprus conflict is a never-ending story, unfortunately. With a personal question referring to persons in politics, and we mentioned Mr. Scholz, we mentioned Angela Merkel, who played a crucial role 2020. Ebru, do you think this is a game changer that Merkel is not longer holding power in Berlin? Is it a problem for harmony in the Aegean and in the Eastern Med that it's Scholz there who's not as close to Erdogan as Merkel reportedly was? Or doesn't this play a role in your analysis?
First of all, I would like to also follow on what Günther mentioned, the speech, and why this speech was maybe a milestone, or whether this speech was something important, or whether we should look at the broader picture. I think the speech and the place of the speech anyways points to the broader picture. Greek-Turkish relations and the tension between Greece and Turkey will be increasingly intermingled with the wider question of EU-NATO cooperation following the Russia-Ukraine war. In that sense, there are different, factors at stake with regard to the formulation of Turkey's foreign policy making these days. The first one is the elections, upcoming elections, the politicization of foreign policy making by Ankara. But the second one is, I think, also the geopolitical narrative, right? The geopolitical conditions and the way Turkey would like to position itself within NATO and vis-a-vis EU in EU's security architecture in light of the Russia-Ukraine war. I think the speech kicked off also these aspirations and these, I think, concerns on the side of Ankara. So I think there are two key factors at play: elections and EU-NATO cooperation and Turkey's place in it. When it comes to Angela Merkel and the end of the Angela Merkel era, of course, it is going to play to some extent a role, because as already mentioned by Günther and by Ioannis, this is also the end of the era, like in terms of a stable, to some extent, stable relationship between Merkel and Erdogan, in which each party was to some extent accustomed, right, to each other's sort of way of communication and policy making, and also risks and potentials with regard to cooperation and dialogue. In that sense, this Merkel factor is right now gone, and to be honest, I think we cannot very easily assume where, what kind of role Olaf Scholz is going to play, because we also were not able to see what kind of a role will actually Olaf Scholz take within the European Council, within the supranational architecture of the European Union, because the Russian crisis or Russian-Ukraine crisis was not able to provide us with such an answer, since EU came actually forward with a common voice for the very first time after many crises. So in that sense, the leadership qualities of Olaf Scholz are actually still questioned, even with regard to domestic politics, right? In that sense, I think this is a key question. And I think a small hint we could get would be the cancelled trip of Annalena Baerbock will be, of course, realized in coming days and weeks. And there, from my sources, what I heard is actually the emphasis on civil society, cooperation between Germany and Turkey, and also renewable energy. And she will most probably also visit many companies or, business interest organizations and groups. But is there going to be a focus also alongside Russia on Greek-Turkish relationship? I think this will provide us with a further, at least, hint at where the where this path could lead us with regard to the German role in Greek-Turkish relationship.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask the same question now to Yanni and then to Günther Seufert, and not only Merkel and Scholz, of course, but also maybe with a look at, we have a government which is run also by Greens and Liberals. And if you look at the party platform of the Greens, there's a clear statement against also the submarine deal. Does this still play a role in the post-Ukraine war phase? Yanni first, and then the concluding remarks from Dr. Seufert.
I think it would be very important for the Greek public opinion, the Greek government, to have a clear statement against what Greece perceives as Turkey's aggression aggression threats in different contexts of the Greek-Turkish disputes. And I would like to concur with what Günther mentioned about Cyprus. Cyprus needs to be taken very seriously into consideration, because it is a conflict, it's a problem that almost got resolved a few years ago, and unfortunately is slowly dragging Greek-Turkish relations into a negative state. It is also important, of course, to remember that the Republic of Cyprus will soon enter an election phase, so it would be difficult to raise like a negotiation, to try to develop a positive agenda. But at the minimum, I think it's very important for the international community, the European Union, Germany, to prevent things from becoming worse, because there is a potential in the upcoming weeks and months like this. As Ebru mentioned, elections in Turkey, elections in Greece as well. We may have early elections in both countries, which make things even more difficult. But in a sense, the more optimistic view of early elections would be that at least we will have a new environment sooner than next year, and then it would be possible for all parties to consider their interest and try to build trust, because I think this is the most important element here. The reason, in my opinion, that this escalation happened so fast has also to do with levels of trust, interpersonal trust between the two leaders. For some reason, the Turkish president appeared to be very annoyed by what the Greek prime minister did in the Congress. On the other hand, I would like to also add that maybe he was also annoyed because Greece has acquired more weight in regional politics, and the way that the Greek prime minister has been received was quite outstanding And this stands to some degree in contrast with the way Turkey is treated in the United States. But apart from that, I think it's very important to focus on the escalation, to make all efforts to prevent things from becoming worse, and then seek the opportunity for developing a positive agenda, both on the bilateral relations and the Cyprus issue, and of course, in a greater framework. And as Ebru mentioned, the European Green Deal is a great opportunity for the region, for Greece and Turkey, and there are a lot of synergies that could be considered and developed if we come to that point, of course, of overcoming the current state of relations.
Günter Seufert, please.
When I understood Ioannis right, he was in a way trying to synthesize the title of our event, namely not ally or not what
mediation or solidarity.
Mediation or solidarity, because Ioannis demanded both a clear statement of the German side towards the Turkish aggression, as he formulated it, and he spoke about the need of de-escalation. And therefore, I think this could not be, it's not different ways, but we have to, in a way, to square the circle, and to both. The question is, how can this be? And therefore, Ebru, I think, rightly mentioned the customs union, because there is nothing we can offer Turkey. We don't have anything other to offer Turkey than to tap into its economic interests. And unfortunately, we have not been able to trigger a new dynamic with a positive agenda. I think this has a lot of reasons, but we don't have the time to ponder on it. But when it comes to the new government, as far as I know, actually the parties that formed the new government, in my opinion, and both you, Mr. Manardus, and I, we have written different papers on this. And I think we both saw that there had been policies towards particularities. There was a policy vision of the Greens towards migration. There was a policy vision of the Liberals towards integration, also of Turkish migrants. There was a policy vision of the Social Democrats when it comes to the ban of automatic lethal weapons. But there was no coherent Turkish policy uniting incentives with what I would say a clear statement, or what Ioannis would call a clear statement. And somebody, I don't like the expression, but also some red lines where we are really saying, this is very important for us. Don't step over this. Yeah. And I think we are still missing this. And what I see in Berlin, that there is, again, this kind of fraction I don't know the English now, a fraction of policies. There is a willing to underline more the necessity of sticking to human rights and of sticking to the rule of law and of more democratizing, but nobody has an idea how this has to be done. And there is an interest in putting through or supporting and helping Turkey to develop a greener economy. And I think we should consider, or we should look how we could unite our German policy towards climate change, not only in Germany, but in the wider region, not only in the European Union, with our aim to anchor Turkey more closely in the West. That would, in a way, increase the costs for Turkey for such an aggressive policy. And therefore, I think we should ponder about how could we link Turkey's really necessity to continue to be anchored in the European market and to have access to the European market with our aim to make a green Turkish economy and a green Turkish energy policy. And I think the more Turkey exports to the European Union, the more it feels a necessity to make his energy and his industry more environment friendly. And therefore, I think we should try to establish a link between this, and we should come forward with a customs union, because the customs union could also be instrumentalized to incentivize a more green Turkey and a more green energy. But this kind of thinking I did not see in Berlin until now, but I see a big interest, a huge interest, as it was in the old government, maybe with different priorities towards Turkey, because it's really a unique relationship between our countries, between Turkey and Germany. And there is a lot of potential for conflict, but I think there's also potential for cooperation, and this potential should be used. And therefore, I would really agree with all of us in the interest of all of the European Union member countries, and not only in the interest of Germany.
That's a wonderful way to conclude. Thank you very much, Gutta Seufert. A futuristic perspective, and I'm positive that also from the German government, we might have listeners and they will have heard your nice thoughts and might even discuss them. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to thank also the participants. Actually, as a moderator, I should keep the time. I failed in that, and I should actually summarize the conclusions. I will fail in that, but I'll be very short. And the question was mediation or solidarity. And in the initial phase, we said mediation and or solidarity. I think that one conclusion is that Germany has indeed in a certain phase of the conflict tried herself as a mediator and been successful together with the European partners to the extent that this thing has not lost control and has been somehow kept in certain parameter. But with the solidarity and the public diplomacy, at least here in Greece, Berlin has a serious problem. And what I always say, this is not conducive to a partnership of two countries in the same alliance and in the same European Union. At the very end, I would like to thank you one more time. I would like to mention that ELIAMEP has a series of educative programs almost on a daily basis. You will find all the mentions and all the information on ELIAMEP's website, eliamep.gr. And if you really like what you see, I can only encourage you to subscribe to the weekly newsletter. We will find links and information on all the great work we do. This said, thank you very much for joining. Have a great afternoon and bye-bye from Athens.
Bye-bye.